Lighting a shuck for the territories, Huck Finn's sudden yet illuminating decision to head out west. In Western slang, lighting a shuck means to get the hell out of somewhere in a hurry. Teenagers or adolescents are known for behaving in impulsive, irrational, and dangerous ways. Many adults, perhaps Mark Twain among them, believe that teenagers don't consider the consequences of their actions. In fact, there's a biological reason for this. The amygdala, a part of the brain responsible for instinctual reactions, develops earlier than the frontal cortex, a part of the brain responsible for reasoning. So teenagers' actions are guided more by the amygdala than by the frontal cortex. Huck Finn is a 13-year-old boy. Is his abrupt decision to head out west guided by the amygdala, like many decisions made by teenagers? Huck's plan for his future, at the end of the novel, doesn't seem to make any sense. All of a sudden he decides to go out west? But I reckon I got to light up the territory ahead of the rest, because Aunt Sally, she's going to adopt me and civilize me, and I can't stand it. I've been there before. Prior to these last few paragraphs, there was no other mention of the West in the entire book. Huck's alternative options to going out west seem like much more logical futures. One possible future would be him getting what he's always wanted, a family. Aunt Sally would like to adopt Huck, and although he may not enjoy being civilized at first, he'll come to appreciate it, just like with the widow. And they will live happily ever after. The other alternative future is the one that Huck and Jim had planned at the start of their raft trip. We would sell the raft and get in the steamboat and go way up the Ohio amongst the free states, and then be out of trouble. In the north, Huck could start a new life with Jim, away from his father, and together they could find Jim's family and live happily ever after. But do either of these futures suit Huck, or is he just making an impulsive decision? Huck's decision to head for the territories at the end of Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is completely logical, because the West fulfills two deep needs of his character that he has learned about on his raft trip. In order to see if the possible futures fit Huck's character, we should fully examine Southern life and Northern life during the 1840s, when Mark Twain set the book. Mark Twain lived in both the North and the South, and when creating Huck's character, he would have used his knowledge of the two regions. In the South, slavery had always been an integral part of society. Especially after the invention of the cotton gin in 1794, slavery was transformed from a mere component to the foundation of the South's entire economic system. The South had always defended slavery by claiming that it was absolutely necessary, but in the 1830s, their arguments changed from defensive to defiant. In 1837, John C. Calhoun, an important Southern senator, called slavery a good, a positive good, and this became Southern opinion. During the 1840s, the argument shifted to include a defense of slavery based on racial grounds. Southern society now claimed that blacks were simply inferior human beings. If Huck stayed in the South, he would live with Aunt Sally, who had slaves. He would go to school and learn pseudoscience about how blacks were inferior beings who need whites to take care of them. And anybody he met would hold those same values. But after his journey with Jim, Huck no longer agrees with Southern society and their values. I got to thinking of our trip down the river, and I see Jim before me all the time, in the day, in the nighttime, sometimes moonlight, sometimes storms, and we are floating along, talking and singing and laughing, but somehow I couldn't seem to strike no place to harden me against him, but only the other kind. Page 233. It is clear that Huck sees Jim as a human being. Even though he has been taught that blacks are inferior, Huck has still learned to see Jim as a human. Huck doesn't just believe that Jim is human, he acts on his belief and tries to rescue Jim. He cannot make himself conform to the Southern ideals, and he would never be able to live in a society that has such opposing beliefs to his. So maybe the South wouldn't work out, but the North doesn't have slavery, so why not the North? The North in the 1840s was undergoing a massive industrial revolution. The entire society was shifting from agrarian to industrial. Hordes of people moved into the cities to work in the factories, and this included millions of new immigrants, many of them fleeing the Irish potato famine. All of the work was in these cities, and urban populations increased by 60% each decade from 1820 to 1840. If Huck went to the North, he would live in one of these congested industrial cities. He would be confined to a tiny living space and would be forced to work long hours at a factory, leaving him with no free time. Yet the Huck we know hates being constrained. He loves the wild and openness of the woods, where he can be himself and just ponder things. I sat down one time, back in the woods, and had a long think about it. Page 23. He does this many times. While on the river, Huck realizes this about himself. We said there weren't no home like a raft after all. Other places do seem so cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. It is clear that Huck would wither in this dirty, crowded cities in the north. In the north and in the south, key parts of Huck's character and personality would suffer, which is why he cannot live in either. The west, on the other hand, is the perfect future for Huck because it fits his character's needs. In 1803, the United States purchased 828 million square miles of territory with the Louisiana Purchase, more than doubling the nation's size. When explorers returned telling tales of unimaginable beauty and untouched wilderness, American expansion westward into the new lands began immediately. The United States then acquired more of West Mexico's lands, as well as part of the Oregon country, and the nation stretched from coast to coast. As more and more people set out to start a new life in the untamed West, they had to learn to survive against the elements in the wild. This created a new American identity called rugged individualism. As people expanded into the West, huge debates arose about whether slavery should also expand into the territories. In 1820, the Missouri Compromise was reached, which prohibited slavery in all territory north of the 3630 line, except for the state of Missouri, and set a precedent for the prohibition of slavery in the West. Thus, the West encompasses two integral parts of Huck's identity: his aversion to slavery and his love of the open wilderness. And it is the perfect future home for Huck because it will allow him to truly be himself. Along the river, on the raft with Jim, Huck found himself. He realized that he thought of Jim as a real person, and therefore could never let him become a slave again. He also realized that he loved the open, uncomplicated life of the wild. These realizations changed Huck's plans for the future. He could no longer live in the north because life in the north would always involve a cramped industrial living area, and he could no longer live in the south because life in the south would always involve slavery. Yet the West did not have slavery, and it had an almost unlimited supply of wild, open land. Although the amygdala causes instinctual reactions, often interpreted as impulsive decisions, new research has shown that instinctual decisions are often right. Huck Finn's decision to light a shop for the territories seemed impulsive, but it was his gut feeling. And, as an examination of his other options revealed, he made the right decision. Mark Twain, in fact, traveled throughout the country, in all the different regions, and he was a keen observer of human nature. Therefore, the ending is not random at all, but well thought out and true to both teenage behavior and the historical circumstances of the time. Just as Huck Finn was shown to make an impulsive decision that turned out to be the right course, and one that really reflected his identity, teenagers today face similar situations. We are all trying to form our identities, and along the way we often make impulsive decisions. I, for example, decided to switch schools just a few days before the start of school. My parents regarded my decision as impulsive, but I had a gut feeling that it would be the best choice for me. This decision reflects my identity, and I changed schools partly because, over the past few years, I have learned things about myself and decided that this would be a better course for me. This is my personal experience, but I'm sure we all can relate to Huck Finn. As we try and figure out who we are, we all make impulsive decisions based on our forming sense of identity. I hope that, like Huck, our decisions will all turn out right in the end.